Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Risk Matrix with myself, Dr. Martin, and Mr. James Junkin. Hey, James, happy Halloween.
Hey, happy Halloween. One of my favorite times of the year. Check it out, Doc. I got pumpkins. I got skeletons. I got spooky stuff.
You
Woo!
got ghosts, right?
We got
Let's also not
Alabama
forget.
football that's scary in and of itself. Roll
All
Tide.
right, well, let's not forget. Also, I'm wearing pink today. It's Breast Cancer Awareness Month for
Absolutely.
the month of October. Um, get checked and breast cancer awareness for those out there that think about those things. All
Absolutely.
right, so
Get
today,
checked.
today, James. Before we get started, I just want to give a little introduction. We've got a guest here. His name is Rob Day. We'll get you in a second. Hi, Rob.
Hello.
We're going to talk about from piracy to participation, why standards in the training industry matter, and we'll get to that in a second. But rip from the headlines, Jane. What do you want to talk about?
Hey, Washington State just put out a safety alert, which reminds us that particularly this time of year, when you see people cutting back in trees and working in landscaping, performing tree trimming tasks as part of their occupation, not as something you're doing at your house or on your own as an individual. This has been extremely hazardous. And I think Washington State has reported 11 landscaping workers that have been killed uh, between 2020 and 2024, and nationwide, it's a leading cause of death. I was really surprised in the safety alert. 228 landscaping workers were killed in 2023.
Well, so as you know, James, Veriforce powers us and they give us a lot of support in having this podcast come on the air. And Veriforce has a lot of clients in the telecom industry, right? And
Right.
if you think about that, telecom, there's a lot of tree trimming that goes on to protect lines and whatnot. And so, I think that's a yearly thing. They used to come by my house when I owned a house and look for trees to trim. One of the things that I see, and as you know, I worked in the crane industry,
Mhm.
is a lot of cranes and rigging problems because when people are trimming trees, they misjudge the weight the weight of what they're attaching to when they're cutting, and also because of the way things are kind of wonky, they're not like just a solid cylinder or, something that they can kind of calculate, and they got branches everywhere. They miscalculate how things are going to swing
Yeah.
when they're cut, right? And so my guess is a lot of these injuries and fatalities come from miscalculations in those manners, and also not having, the correct uh, layout of the lift area or of the trimming area to protect those workers. But I guess it could be anybody's guess. Was there anything in the article about that?
Well, it looks like from the article, a lot of the hazards relate to climbing, not being properly tied off, working in these type of environments, not doing really good hazard assessments as to what the hazards are. So, what they're recommending is making sure that when you're a hiring client that's hiring a contractor, or you're a contractor performing these types of works, that you have qualified personnel, that you're conducting the right hazard assessment, that you have the right equipment. I thought this was a really good hazard alert because I was unaware that there are certified tree care safety professionals, a CTSP.
Yeah.
Never heard of such a thing. Makes sense. Or an ISA certified arborist who can come out and help evaluate these job sites and make sure that we got the proper hazards, the proper controls in place before we go to work. So a lot of the recommendations that came out of this hazard alert, very common to what we see in other industries, in other work sites. Hazards are best controlled in the planning of the work, having someone do a detailed hazard analysis, making sure we have the proper controls. So, tree
Right.
trimming, one of the most dangerous jobs in America, it appears.
Yep. So thank you for having that discussion with me, James. We're gonna roll right in with our guest here, Mr. Rob Day. He's the managing director at Cognisense. Rob is a regulatory compliance and training standards expert with a military firefighter background. And that evolved into decades of hazardous materials response, risk assessments, and for major insurers and advisory work shaping legislation and industry standards. His current focus is on how technology impacts training integrity, verification, and compliance, bringing a uniquely informed perspective on where online assessment tools protect or compromise workplace safety. Welcome, Rob. That was a mouthful. Did I get anything wrong on that, Rob, or anything else
Sounded
that you want to
beautiful. I wanna meet that guy someday.
share?
That's a
Sounds like a
cool
pretty
guy.
cool guy.
Let's meet that guy. I bet that guy's an Alabama fan. Roll Tide. Had to work it in, Rob. Had to work
He
it
could be. He could be. So lead us into the work that you do, Rob. I mean, I'm interested in this because this relates to the changes in the 490 standard, and some other kind of timely things. Can you give us a little background on
Sure.
what you're working on or what you're involved in?
Sure, and it's probably a good place to start. I'll tie it into what you were just talking about as far as the tree trimming. When I was listening to the different things, like where you tie off, as far as how we determine that the judgment or hazard assessments. So how do we teach people how to tie training? How do we talk about how to do proper hazard assessment training? James, you're talking about people being certified. Is like, how do we do that? Training and online assessments as far as even if we look at engineering controls, as far as every engineering control usually required training to actually determine how to implement it. What if I'm going to bypass the engineering controls? Training, every piece of PPE requires training. Often in the hierarchy of controls, we think of training just being that administrative area, but it actually is something that supports all the areas. I actually gained my passion for this. I was doing investigations for a law firm, and one of the cases that I came across was a situation where there was 4 people on site. They were loading a tanker with hydrocarbons. They were all supposed to have training on how to properly load and unload hydrocarbons. They all had training certificates on that, but only one person actually took it, and he actually admitted on the stand he took it for the rest of his crew. 2 of those workers were badly burned over the majority of their body after the explosion happened, and that's was the start of me thinking, it's like, "Wait a second, this is rather concerning," and in that case, we were talking about somebody doing somebody else's training.
Yep.
That's
Happens
one
all it
aspect. Yeah.
happens all the time, Rob. I can't even tell you how many times I've been with a client and they've led me to believe that wives, girlfriends, significant others, foremen, superintendents, and other company personnel, HR even,
Yes.
taking training for somebody else, and that's the kind of thing that you get into. Very tragic story,
Yes.
that you shared with us.
in. And
And
Rob,
it's
no
sorry, go ahead, James.
doubt, given the rise of e-learning, Dr. Martin and I had an episode here recently where we talked about, can you defend your training? A large part of our practices is helping clients navigate OSHA inspections, wrongful death, gross negligence type claims where workers have been seriously injured or killed. No one wants to go through that, but when we have those instances, one of the first questions OSHA asks for, and plaintiff's lawyers, subsequently we will in any type of litigation, is show us your training. And so, what challenges have you seen as we transition from the traditional instructor led in the classroom? We've got signed rosters, things to nowadays, I'd say most training's done by e learning.
Yeah. I I think what ended up happening, and I think you both have long careers in health and safety, is when you think of the situation, well, they have talk about that scenario of boiling a frog type thing. You just turn up the heat a little bit at a time. What ended up happening is our move from in person to online happened in a little bit of time. I think we all old enough to go where people were saying like, no, we'll never do confined space or fall protection. Like, we'll do a site orientation and we'll do awareness training, but we won't do anything serious, anything. And eventually everything moved online. It was mainly because other people were doing it. It just became acceptable. No one ever stopped to seem to and analyze it and say, okay, in-person training met a legal standard. There's plenty of court precedent on it as far as because an employer needs to ensure that the worker has the training. It's not up to the worker to go out and get the training. It's up to the employer to ensure. And when it's in person, we all remember as far as somebody falls asleep in your class, they're on their cell phone. They couldn't have somebody else swap in for them. They couldn't not attend for the afternoon. Those situations wouldn't stand. But it's interesting enough, and I can think of like there's an organization in the States there as far as that deals with trenches. I'll just leave it that generic. Their in person standard says you must show ID, present it, pay attention, be there present. Their online standard for the same course, same certificate, same designation requires no verification of who the person is, that they actually participated, that they were awake, and it sounds like we're talking about the individuals and when I talk about people doing other people's training, but Dr. Martin, as far as one of the other things with AI, there are things that we can do now as far as the majority of safety training out there, you can go on to Chat GPT or let's say, I won't explain how to do this. I don't want to make become part of the problem, but more or less you can ask it the right question. It'll give you a cheat code. You can choose the the score you want to get on your safety training and it will mark it complete. So it means you could do OSHA 10 in OSHA 10 seconds. You could do any
Wow.
safety training out there. When I say any, it's like 99% of it, 95% of it. Not to mention some of the agentic or the agents will actually go in, log in, and if your company assigns you 50 pieces of training, you can just set the agent, it'll go in, navigate the menu system, find it, complete it, watch the videos, answer the questions, and all you need to do is come back maybe 8 hours later, and all your training is done for you. And
Wow.
that's a new world that we're going into. And like you were mentioning, is what does training mean to us when, like James, you were saying, when OSHA comes and does an investigation, said we did training, is like, no, you have a training entry in a database or a
You have
card.
a certificate,
Yeah.
right?
Did
Has
you as the
got your
employer
name on it.
ensure that they were trained? Yeah.
Yeah. So James and I both, have worked in academia, and academia uses a number of things, and I want you to kinda tell me a little bit if this is kind of where, your research, your, cognizance is going with this, but, we've seen remote proctor now, we've seen Respondus lockdown browser where you show your camera around the room, you show your ID, it takes a picture, and I assume that AI is looking at all these things and matching faces, because nobody's except for some certification exams where they actually have a proctor watching you. I've had that happen, right? It's all AI driven on that side of the screen too. They're matching the ID to the person, and they're matching the video, and they're watching for eye movements, right? Which is similar to the tracking that you do when you're doing marketing, right? Where are people looking on the page? Are they looking off the page, etc.? So how does that compare to what you're kind of proposing or you're seeing or doing in your sector?
Sure. I would say as far as the first thing is that level, what the level of proctoring and vigilation that hit the academic group is not necessary, and in most cases won't even combat the AI risks that we have. What I'm calling for, because you can mention as far as whether it be legal, insurance work, or working in a refinery and everything else, hazard assessment is so important, as you mentioned with the treater. The problem is hazard assessments are not being applied to online training. There is with AI problems come AI solutions. There's solutions out there right now that could work on all the training that just verify who the person is, utilizes technology similar to your cell phone. If you hold it up, it'll detect your face, let you in. If you're watching it, it doesn't go black because it knows the face is there, all without any information even leaving your device. This is like low touch, low cost solutions. All these things exist, and there isn't one solution that fits any particular organization because I wouldn't recommend the same thing for a crane certification as I would for a site orientation. Because
Mhm.
I Site orientation, just be there and be awake and conscious, so that I
Yep.
know that you're
Right.
hearing it. But when it comes to the craning certification, I wanna make sure AI is not doing things for just doing it for you, answering your
Right.
questions.
We
Yeah.
sort of
Right.
draw the line at competency. You know, in safety, we use the term like awareness level, orientation level. To break it down for our listeners that are just sort of becoming more familiar with the practice of safety, where I draw the line is one's informational. I'm just giving you some information.
Yeah.
The other, I'm expecting you to demonstrate some sort of skill. So you may be going into a confined space as an entrant. You may be doing air monitoring as an attendant. You might be operating a crane, and it has its own standard. You may be being a qualified rigger. I ran across a company we were assessing last month that their rigging training is all online.
Yeah.
I don't know if but I don't want a rigger lifting something over my house that all their training is online. I hope they've rigged some stuff up and saw it get up off the ground and get set down, with some
I
modicum of safety without crashing into stuff. So,
Yeah.
powered industrial trucks, these type of things. But as the technology has advanced, and AI has been a great tool for getting the speed of production,
Mhm.
research, generating articles, more content. It's made my life a lot easier. But it sounds like from where that's coming is there have been nefarious activities. Both Dr. Martin and I come from academia. Can't tell you the fact that I've had to go out there and talk to students about using AI responsibly.
Yeah.
I can tell when your entire work product has been generated by AI,
Well, when
And
it
you
says on the end, what does it say? "Can I help you with
copy
anything else?" And not
regenerate.
copy right into the paper?
At
but
one
the interesting
it
part
it
is as
said
far as
copy regenerate at the bottom. I'm like, "Look, bro."
yeah. But the interesting part, both you coming from academia, you can see, higher education took an active role to say, what is the impact of AI on the integrity of the process? The interesting thing that's happened in the safety world is the employers own the responsibility to ensure the workers trained. They hire a company, usually external company, to provide the training. And those companies, in a lot of cases, will be hands up. It's like, it's not our job to actually increase the standard or, just be on top of that. The employers, if they want it, they need to ask for it. The problem is the employers aren't in the training industry and aren't aware. It's like, imagine higher ed if the employers of the students had to ask you to do something in higher ed. And they're like, wait, whoa, whoa. It's like, we're down the ecosystem here a lot farther.
Right.
I think it's a little bit of one, a little bit of the other, right? I think some employers, they want to know what's going on, and other employers don't want to know what's going on because allowing the kind of things that we talked about earlier to happen actually makes things go faster, right? I'm just going to be very honest that I'm sure James has had clients like this too that they kind of look the other way, when these things are happening. But I think, and I know that we have some OSHA people that watch us. I think OSHA at some point is going to catch on to what you're saying. Like 99.9% of safety training can be hacked so that somebody can do it for you or somebody is doing it for you. They're going to go beyond. I think this is gonna happen, and I don't want to put thoughts in people's heads, but they're gonna start asking not only for the certificate, but proof that you actually due diligently made sure that they were the person taking the training.
And I
Well,
think that's a nice segue to the ANSI Z490 standard, which actually is saying if you are providing training, you need to be able to confirm the identity of the individual, that that same individual participated, and they weren't assisted by technological aids like AI and everything else that skewed the outcome, in the end.
I'm not on the ANSI 490 committee, but I do know several people who are on that 490 committee, and I wanna talk about the change that the 490 committee came back, but before we completely transition that, I will say this. There's an old Johnny Cash song. You can run on for a long time, but sooner or later, God'll cut you down. You have to, as an employer, exercise reasonable due care. The truth always comes out in your story that opened this up, right? Where you got one person taking the test for the entire crew. When did everybody become aware of that? Probably at the deposition.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
That is not where you want to find that out at. And you as an employer are responsible for taking reasonable due care steps to
yeah.
ensure that things like that are not happening. And I think that's a good place to transition to this 490 standard because that sounds to me exactly what the 490 committee, their intent was in developing this new standard and saying you need identity verification. particularly focused at e-learning type training. Your
Yeah,
thoughts?
and I go back, even Dr. Martin, you were talking about what OSHA's reaction would be. I have seen, looking at different jurisdictions, because we work around the globe, as far as for jurisdictions where a people got training, they the right people were doing the right training, but they were let out early. This is in person. Let out 50% halfway through the day, which I know in my life has happened so many times. It's like being let out early of a safety course. Anyway, they were charged with 17 counts of issuing fraudulent documents, the actual certificates, and put out of business by the regulator. If you think of New
Yeah.
York, where you got Valor type of thing, in that case, the worker had the certificate. He didn't actually complete it at all, type of thing, and somebody else did it. There, the interesting thought I get when talking to regulators, as far as, are training providers a supplier? Like, what onus do training providers have as well to ensure a certain standard? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if you're certified, right, we have professional ethics that guide us, right? And nobody wants to get turned in for doing something like that. It comes to mind. I've done a lot of HAZWOPER training, and a lot of OSHA refreshers, right, 8-hour
Yeah.
refreshers, and I do a lot for construction firms that get into HAZWOPER situations. And I always, the first question is, we're doing an 8-hour refresher, and the person raises their hand first thing in the morning and says, "How long is this going to take?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Can we get out before lunch?"
Yep.
Eh, I can't even tell. Almost every single time, if not every single time, right? I've heard that. And to your point about, people getting certificates, there was a while back OSHA cracked down on that, the OSHA 10 30 hours, with their authorized instructors, because people were meeting at inappropriate places like the bar,
Yeah.
and handing out OSHA, cards to people, and letting them out early, and taking 3-hour lunches, and, trying to push everything in a 10-hour into one day, but then having a 2-hour lunch and 5 breaks, right?
Yeah.
And that's no more, right? There's a lot of ethics that surround that. But
There's more
really, I'd like to hear.
liability. I don't want to derail this, but for our instructors that are listening to this, there's a lot of liability in the things that you do.
Yeah.
And there was an old master trainer named Gary Pullman that worked at Veriforce for many years, back when it was PEC safety. And he used to say this all the time, and it's so true. Guard your signature. Guard your signature. So if you put on a class that the class was 8 hours and the class was really 5 hours, you may have to defend that in a courtroom at some point. And here's the question that's going to be posed to you. What safety training did you leave out that could have prevented this incident? Isn't it true, Dr. Martin, that such and such would be alive today? Such and such would be able to walk today. Such and such wouldn't be burned today. If you had only had provided them the full content of the training that was within the syllabus. So what did you leave out?
Yep.
Right?
Just goes back to what you were saying, James. Your Johnny Cash, uh,
You can
quote
run
there.
on for a long time, but sooner or later, God will cut you down.
I have a good friend, and she told me once, "The truth will always rise." It
Yeah.
it may not rise when you want it to, but it's going to rise, and you sure as heck don't want it to rise in a courtroom.
Nope.
Yeah.
S No, you want it to rise early, and with your name favorably shown in the record. So, let's
I
get
used
back
to,
to Rob. I wanna give Rob
yeah.
some talking time here, because we started with the 490, right?
Yeah.
And let's progress a little bit with that and talk about things, that your company, other companies are doing to kind of, um, meet that.
Sure. As far as, and and just to give you some background, I like telling little stories. So as far as, I used to I'm retired now, but used to have my CSP. So I worked through industry on that, as far as, and I remember when I used to teach a HAZWOPER course years ago, or talking about legislation and due diligence, and people would get confused different times. And I said, the underlying, one of the biggest things, you just need to care. For most cases, if you care and have pride in your job, that manages a whole bunch of aspects.
Yep.
And so all they're trying to do is legislate that caring. As far as the ANSI Z490 standard is really trying to bring that forward, so saying we need to care at least as much as we used to when we were in person. Okay. And we need to start treating training as a control mechanism like we would any other, like whether it's like, I want to overly fancy into like a bow tie analysis or something. But when you think of as far as, is this I put in a control, is it going to work? Can I rely on it? And most investigations I've been involved in often say, was the person trained? Or, well, maybe they were trained, but they didn't execute it as opposed to the training. I think what we're going to see is more of these cases where they start, was the person really trained? How, like James, you were saying, do we know the person actually saw the training? Because now with AI able to, you don't have to speak the language, you don't have to be able to read, and it'll go through. And just, as far as the inventor of, and I'm going to be a little cagey here so I don't help people how to put in the right queries, but
We'll
there,
talk about that offline
yeah,
because
so,
Right.
James and I
but
can probably use that in our teaching.
95% of the safety training is produced in a file type that the inventor of that file type said should never be used for training like safety training because it has an inherent flaw in it. You can imagine if this was craning or rigging or anything else, we'd be like, okay, that's a limitation. Read the manufacturer's requirements. So in this case, the inventor said that, and all it is before it took people to have more education in order to get bypass it. Now it just takes somebody to be able to write a query, and in 5-10 seconds you have the cheat codes, you know, and that's where I think, as far as I think people like in all industries, AI is moving so fast type of thing that we need to actually understand that it is moving fast and we need to up our game as far as is in the profession. And what we do as a company is we help organizations do those hazard assessments. We'll go and check systems. Think what AI couldn't do 6 months ago, it can do beautifully right now. And as you can imagine, when it comes to things like the ANSI standard and everything else, how often do we see changes in standards or legislation or regulatory opinion? If we're waiting for Big Brother to tell us that we have to do something, we will end up in a courtroom. And the sad part, every time I've been involved in a courtroom, is somebody was killed or badly, badly hurt. And
Mhm.
as you're saying, Dr. Martin, as far as we have an ethics side of this, as far as we should be made aware of this. And that's what I'm trying to do, is create more awareness as far as just tell organizations, look at your programs, whether you're hiring it out or if you're a training provider yourself, look at your programs. Could a dog be given this training? And we tried that with our company, and we have a dog named Phoebe that has OSHA 10, has forklift, nuclear gauges. She got demerits off her driver's license. You name it. She's
It's
got all,
funny, not funny.
yeah.
Funny, not funny.
That's
It
awesome.
brings people's attention to it because the only human requirement we're seeing now in the training is the provision of a credit card. That's it. And that to me is, like you're saying, funny, not funny. As far as, it's sad that it's become in many cases a tax on people's time or money, and training was not designed to be that. As James, you were saying, it's designed to be one way of developing competence, or is aid to developing competence. You know,
Knowledge.
yeah, and building that up, and we've lost that, and sometimes, as I'm sure you've talked about before, safety management becomes a matter of checking boxes and just doing what was done before, and I think we're finding the world's changing faster than, our historical
So,
norms,
Right.
could
so
would
I
require.
want to ask you something in the two-part
Sure.
question. The first part is, I think we've done a good job highlighting what the issue is, right? And you've mentioned conducting hazard assessments. So let's say my company has its own internal LMS, my safety department's developed its own internal training, it's hosted on the LMS. What does that type of hazard assessment look like? And then the second part is, what if we're using a third party provider? I don't want to name all the different, everybody creates e-learning training now, but if I'm using access to some third party website to conduct safety training, what does that hazard assessment look like? And how's
So
it done?
don't tell us where Phoebe takes her courses.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I hope it's
Um,
not
I
marriedorgolf.com.
I know.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say, as far as like we would in anything else, if I apply this to craning type of thing, if we were going to figure out a standard for our company on cranes, I'd look at as far as what legislation, what industry standards, are out there, and try to look at those for guidance. And we have the ANSI Z490. There's organization like IACIT that does continuing education and training we could use. We could look outside of our industries into other like higher ed and everything else. But when you start doing that, you have to then be able to translate it to your industry and what's applicable. Health and safety training is often done on phones, like so it means a lot of the health higher ed solutions won't work. We need it to be more responsive in its design and performance. So the first thing is find those standards and then come in and start asking those questions like doing, most organizations doesn't have to be complex if I were to ask as far as do you know who the individual is? And most will say, well, we have a login. Okay, now let's go back to the question. Do you know who the individual is that's doing the training? It's like, no, we just know who we gave. Yeah, we sent a login to an email address or something like that. So they don't. Do you know the participation? If is that accurate? Is the verified individual the one participating? No, we don't. What we do is we put in gates or test your knowledge exams to make sure they're still awake. You know, but saying, could that be done by somebody else or by AI? It's like, yes, it could be. And they can find that out just by asking AI itself. The cool thing is it will help you with that hazard assessment and say, could somebody else be doing this? That could an agent be doing the training for our organization? And the answer would be yes. And it's like, do we have any kind of blocks for AI in our system? And the majority of health and safety training, the answer is no. If you move out to others like interesting, like food safety. I'm from Canada. I didn't mention as far as so food safety is there's a requirement across Canada that they need to verify the identity and participation of people going through that. You'll have food manager training in the States, where they'll have situations where they'll manage that. It seems there's pockets of other industries that are doing things, and it's just taken a while for it to get to the health safety industry.
So you mentioned something there. I want to circle back to it.
You bet.
You mentioned, does your company have blocks on AI? I suppose that uh, is that one of the solutions to having people take um, online training through company supported portals, laptops, iPads, etc., but then to block AI in some manner that
Yeah, I don't want people to think that we're not talking about blocking ChatGPT access or anything like that. We're saying that the course, and I'll use one of the methods that AI is helping people, and we get most of these from Reddit forums where people are bragging or telling other people how they got through their OSHA training so quickly. And as far as one of it is you ask AI for these cheat codes. I'll keep that generic. And then you go in and you can paste it in, and I won't say exactly where. We can talk after as far
Yeah.
you paste it in, and then you just pick your score, and it marks it complete. Say that pasting in is just a weakness in the system type of thing that can be shored up by moving away from certain legacy file types or by putting something in there that just says we won't allow users to add code into the system.
awesome,
Very
awesome. So
it's
that's
very
kind of where
mostly
my question was going. Like,
simple, like, some of it, like changing file types is there's a no cost associated other than that technician just going and uploading it in a site saying, "Please give me my training back in a higher file type," and they've just stopped the cheat codes from being able to work. And
love
some
it,
of it is that easy, no
love it.
cost. It just matter our industry just isn't aware of what's happening yet.
Yep. So
Hmm.
how do we make them aware? Okay.
Well,
I
it's
know
you're
this is what
starting.
you do,
Yeah,
right? So we're
yeah.
starting by educating people. How how do they go about finding somebody like yourself to help them upgrade, educate, make their
Yeah.
systems better?
I would say again, this is gonna sound salesy, but the
That's
reason why
okay.
I'm doing what I'm doing as far as I owned an assessment company where we built our own LMS and assessment. I then actually was involved with proctoring. I was using higher ed and high stakes, everything else. And that's things that I've done. And so now that I'm getting old as far as I thought I'd pick a easier consulting type career. And that's the matter of what we're doing now as far as so the mix of health and safety knowledge and technology is rare. Um, and as far as in our industry, you can imagine if no one's asking for it, then there usually isn't a demand, a lineup of consultants and anyone else that could help you do the assessments.
Yep.
So, to my knowledge, we're the only ones doing this now in the sector. Most of the other ones, you more deal with the professionals after the incident, which is
Yeah.
never the good
Well,
place.
it's never good. And like James and I said, you don't want the truth to rise when you're in court or when OSHA is questioning you on, you know, all the different aspects of your training. So, tell us how to get a hold of you. If our listeners want to talk about this more, because I find this fascinating. I don't know about you, James, but I can see
Absolutely.
application in your LMS as well, because I
Right.
know that you have your own LMS for training.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So,
and
how do they get a hold of you, Rob?
hopefully we can put something in show notes or something there as far as that'll help. But as far as so the company name is Cognisense. So it's cognisance360.com. And as far as that's the best way to actually reach out and we're happy to help out. In many cases, like having a conversation is not something we ever charge for. So in some organizations will have the skill set in-house that they don't need to hire go external. But in the end, as far as I, s- you read at the beginning, I started out as a firefighter, EMT. I worked in refineries and everything else. My life has been a matter of a service type. I do believe that what I'm doing is good work right now, and I do believe people can make a good living doing good things, and that's what I believe we're doing right now. So if I can help out in any way, be happy to.
I love that you're retired too, and pal, you look a lot younger than I am. So let's not talk about being
I have an
old.
AI filter on this. Like it's like
Okay,
mild.
so
Uh,
so
I'm
you're
really
like 90. Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
I'm 90, but it's like I could take my teeth out and show you, but I won't. I'll leave
All
it
right,
at
thanks. Please don't.
Man, please don't.
Um,
Thank you.
so James, thanks, Rob, for coming. Really appreciate the discussion. James, you want to take us out? Tell
Thanks,
people
Rob.
how to get a hold of you and I.
Thanks, Rob. I learned so much today, and I think our listeners did as well. Hey, I got a challenge for our listeners. If you learned something today, hit that subscribe button. If you had fun today, hit that subscribe button. If you are committed to bringing workers home safe from high hazard jobs and you found value in our podcast today, go out there and hit that subscribe button. We do this for you. We appreciate everyone tuning into our podcast. We're available across a variety of platforms. Certainly, Veriforce's YouTube channel, who powers us, who makes this podcast happen, has so for the last 2 years. We can't thank them enough for their support in empowering this podcast. We're also available on Spotify. We're available on Apple Podcast. We're available on some other podcast platform I can't never remember.
Yeah.
If you can't find the risk matrix, you're not looking, baby. So we thank you for listening. Thank you, Rob, for coming on, sharing a lot of this. I took a lot of notes myself. A lot of things we need to tighten up. Uh, you referenced the ANSI 490 standard. If you're looking for the ANSI 490 standard, you can Google that, or if you're a member ASSP, just log into your account and there's a way to buy the 490 standard that can help you get your training programs in line with the industry acceptable practice. But until next time, Dr. Martin,
I just want to say it just depends.
just depends.
What about
We
you, James?
almost made it through a whole podcast without that, Rob. We made it 39 minutes with no existence.
39 minutes and roll tide.
And roll tide. Till next time, roll tide. Keep it workers safe. Out.